Hello and welcome to Growing Pains, which is our special roundtable chat to talk all things family life. It's a wide-reaching topic that encompasses so many different areas. We're talking raising babies, navigating kids growing up, family dynamics, friendships, but what does family life look like today? We're not just here to talk about the glossy bits. We're going to delve into the real moments, the tricky, potentially not so nice moments, away from the Instagram highlight reel. But luckily, I'm not here to answer these questions all by myself, or else it would be a 30-minute tribute to my dog, Joey. Hi, Joey. So I'm really excited to say we have three very exciting guests here joining me. So we have Dilly Carter. Hello, Dilly. Hello. We can all hear each other. It's working, thank God. Dilly is a masterclass in detoxing space. She is a professional organizer and is the founder of Declutter Dollies, an organizing and home styling service that promises to turn her clients' chaos into calm and help discover the health benefits of living in an organized home. Dilly is also the author of Create Space, a room-by-room guide to organizing your home with a fresh and relatable take on the link between mental well-being and decluttering. And she also, you probably recognize her from, provides decluttering advice on the BBC Sort Your Life Out. So thanks for joining us, Dilly.
Thank you.
Thank you. Then we have Lottie Jeffs, and Lottie is an award-winning magazine writer, editor, author, podcaster. They are a contributing editor for Grazia and have hosted the award-winning podcast Some Families and also Grazia's Life Advice. Lottie was previously the deputy editor of Elle, and your first children's book, My Magic Family, was published by Puffin, and your debut novel, This Love, will be published by Dialogue in 2024. And you're busy, and The Queer Parent, everything you need to know from gay to Z, is out in May. Busy, Lottie. We will come to you and how you fit it all in a bit.
Thanks, Holly.
Andrea Thompson. Hello, Andrea.
Hello.
Living out my Eurovision fantasy. You're the editor-in-chief currently at Marie Claire UK, where we used to work together. And Andrea has worked as a senior journalist for a range of publications over her 20-year career, including the Sunday Times, The Guardian, Channel 4 and Grazia. She sits on the committee of the British Society of Magazine Editors, where she acts as vice chair and also looks after diversity and inclusion within that role. And finally, last but not least, Stuart, with the shortest bio. Stuart Heritage is a freelance writer whose work has appeared in The Guardian. Please read his work in The Guardian, The Times and Vanity Fair. His newest children's book, Don't Say Elephant, will be published by Puffin this June. Welcome, Stuart. Short, succinct. I like it.
I feel like I could have gone on a bit longer, to be honest with you. Never mind.
You've got time. You've got time for that. It's all right. It's all right. So enough about me talking. I'm now going to pass the baton over to you. So can you talk us through your family setup, your journey so far, and where you're at now in terms of family life? And Stuart, as you had to wait so long for me to intro you, you can start with this.
Oh, thank you very much. I am it's a very kind of boring, normal kind of traditional family setup, really. I've got a wife, I've got 2 kids, I've got an 8-year-old and a 5-year-old. I wasn't bald before I had them. Now I'm bald. And it's, I guess I kind of, it might be slightly unusual. I kind of do the majority of the childcare in my house because my wife has sort of, she wasn't very well for quite a long time, and I kind of just started doing it, and it turns out I really enjoy it. Luckily, because they're my children and everything. But yeah, that's about it.
Thanks for that. And Dilly, how does your family look like now?
Oh, actually, it's just turned a bit of a corner. So I've got there's myself, my husband, and my 9-year-old, soon to be 10. We have been trying for a long time for a baby, but I recently found out that I had cancer of my womb, and I had to have a hysterectomy, and we are now going to adopt. So that is where I am on my pathway at the moment. So I'm sort of just finishing the treatment for cancer, and then I'm going to be adopting, hopefully. I don't know. I need to get through this last stage, and then that's where we're going. But life has evolved in the last 6 months. It's changed dramatically. And actually, I haven't spoken about that publicly. This is the first time I've talked about it. So I'm going to be talking about that tonight for the first time on my Instagram, because I kept it very private. But I'm now finally feel I'm ready to talk about it, and I'm strong enough. So yeah, it's been a really tricky family time, actually. Not tricky, but just, sad family time, actually.
Well, thanks so much, firstly, for sharing that, because that must have been so tough. But also, how are you feeling now?
Do you know what? Today is actually, like I said, tonight I'm actually talking about it on my platform for the first time. So I'm feeling a bit nervous and a bit anxious about that, but I'm very relieved. You know, I got the all clear last week after lots of scans, lots of PET scans and all sorts, because there was all sorts of things left inside me from when I had the major surgery a couple of months ago. And I had a really horrific surgery, which meant that I couldn't walk for 12 weeks. So I've been in a lot of pain behind the scenes, but I've sort of maintained, it's almost, you know, like a swan. I've been on the surface, everything's been fine, but underneath I've been, you know, like this. So I've maintained that. And I actually feel very proud of myself that I did, because I think in a day where everything is on social media, I managed to keep it quiet and keep it private, because I think there are some things you just can't share, not just because you don't want to, because I'm an oversharer, but because I wasn't in the right place to do that. And I now feel like I'm okay. I can talk about it now because I'm through it. I always like to talk about things from a place of experience. And I felt like I couldn't share it at the beginning because I hadn't been through it myself. Now I've been through it, I can now talk about it. So now I can talk about it with experience and yeah, just with a bit more strength, because I just literally had nothing in me when I first found out, of course, because it was so traumatic and so, you know, devastatingly awful, this news, because, you know, we've been trying to have a baby for 10 years, and to then find out, you know, when I went to go and have some treatment to have some fibroids removed, that I had cancer, it was like a huge blow. So yeah, it's been a lot to process, but I feel actually surprisingly strong today.
Oh, I mean, if I could give you a hug, I would. But also to do it on your own terms like that is incredible. But also have to, being in the public eye, also have another layer on top of that of trying to sort of not hide it, but obviously because you are, you know, out there on social media. I mean, God, well, I'm so happy that you're through this. Well, you're not. I mean, it's the journey continues, but
yes.
Yeah.
I'm about to start 5.5 weeks of radiation in a few weeks, so it's not quite through it, but I feel like that's the easy part. The hard part's done. I've gone through the hard part. I've survived it. I've got through it. I've had the operations. It's all been removed. But you know, now it's the easy part. You know, 10 minutes under a machine every day, I can do that, no problem, and go to work and start filming. So that's the goal anyway.
Dilly, I mean, hats off. Seriously. Well, we'll talk about that. And again, thanks for sharing that. And you know, and well, we'll all be looking tonight and all the support. I mean, and Andrea, like, how has your journey been? I mean, this just shows, doesn't it, what like family life encompasses so much. It's not just a one size fits all for everyone, is it? It's just a complete, things are coming at you from all directions you didn't even think about. And what's your journey been like?
Well, I just want to say, Dilly, God, I'm sending you all the love and support. Thank you so much for sharing that. So my setup is myself and my partner have got 2 boys. One is 11 and one is 8. So I live in a house of 3 boys, and you know, I work in an office full of women, majoritively. You know, the majority of my colleagues are women, and an industry that's very sort of female dominated. And I come home and it's sort of frat house, and it's a completely different dynamic. But definitely, like, my work at Marie Claire means that I'm raising boys, hopefully to be a bit more emotionally intelligent than some of the, you know, boys these days get so many sort of negative influences from outside. So I'm really trying to put the good stuff in on a daily basis, and to kind of counter some of the influences on social media and on YouTube and the whole Andrew Tate thing, which is just horrendous. And you know, on a day-to-day basis, just attempting to balance quite a high pressure job and traveling, etc., with being a mom as well, which on a good day, if you catch me, I feel like, yeah, I've got this, it's under control. And then other days I just feel like complete mess and like all over the place and can barely hold it together. And if I get to work with like 2 matching shoes, it's a miracle. So it's like very, very up and down. And for me as a mum, one of the things that, you know, as parents, Will and I always say, you know, heaven and hell are very close together. So even when you think you're on a roll and it's all going great, like the next minute you've got 2 tantruming kids fighting in the street and you're just like, ah. My kids fight all the time, and it drives me crazy. So yeah, that's where I am.
Lovely, Andrea. And Lottie, tell us about your journey, and it's something you've spoken about and you've written about, but it's a really interesting journey.
Yeah, so I have a daughter with my wife. She carried my daughter and gave birth to her. She's now almost 5. She's 5 in July. And we have been trying to expand our family. We thought it would be nice if I was the next one to carry a child. Unfortunately, that just didn't work for me. I tried quite a few times with IVF and IUI, and it just didn't work. Like, it's just, nobody knows why, just didn't happen for me, which obviously when you're paying for a private fertility treatment is not only emotionally difficult, but financially crippling, quite honestly. So that didn't work. So we're sort of thinking about our other options, and yeah, still hoping to expand our family. We actually got 2 kittens recently, which took up a lot of headspace and kind of expanded our family in a way I had never quite imagined we would. I never thought we'd get pets. So that's been really lovely. But we do still want another kid. I guess it's just thinking about how that might happen.
Well, and thanks all of you just for being so candid and honest and just, laying it all on the table with this. And I think it's going to be so important for people watching and listening that it's not sort of a really linear route. It's just everyone's circumstances are so different, and also you don't know what everyone's going through. So I think that's, especially with social media and what you're talking about, and we mentioned about the highlight reel earlier, it is really not what you see on Instagram. I mean, we can say this time and time again, but even those silly moments that happen on Instagram, you're like, well, just like you, it's still curated. So I think it's just really, worth everyone listening, bearing that in mind. This is one for all of you, but I find this really interesting because we all think about our childhood and how we were raised, but how has your childhood or how you grew up, has it impacted how you are today as just an adult and a parent yourself? Maybe Dilly, do you want to just start with that?
Yeah, I mean, my whole career is because of my mum, because I grew up in chaos. My mum's house was always messy. My mum and dad's house, they were, lived in utter chaos, and I hated it. And I went the opposite way. So my room was always my sanctuary. It was always neat and tidy. I was constantly trying to tidy up the house after them, but they weren't interested because, they worked 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I grew up practically at my neighbour's house because my mum and dad were always working. So the house was the lowest on their priority. So what I've done is go completely opposite. Not only have I now made that my business because I was able to look after my mum and turn her house around when she then lived with my dad later on in years gone by and I'd moved out. When I went back to her house and it was chaotic and I helped to turn it around really quickly, I realized that, this was something I was really good at, and then turned it into a business. So that impacted my life. But also the lack of time spent with my family is complete opposite to what I have now with my daughter. So I didn't have a relationship with my mum really, and I didn't really have much of a relationship with my dad in terms of, we weren't that type of family that would sit and talk about our day and talk about, periods, girls, boys, whatever, relationships, friends. It was just a very functional relationship. And I talk about that very openly, that my family and I have a very functional relationship. It's not a gushy, lovey, #mum's my best friend type thing. And neither was my dad. But I have an amazing relationship with my daughter, and we put so much time into her and into spending time together. We're a very tight unit. So I think that sometimes, no matter what you have growing up, it doesn't always have to follow through into your adulthood. I suppose it depends on who you are as a person and how you are. But I realized that that wasn't something that I was going to continue to do. I was always like, I will always try and pick my daughter up when I can. I'll always try and make sure that we spend quality time together, that we have a relationship where she can talk to me about anything. So yeah, I think it had a huge impact on my life growing up on how I am now. And for the good or bad, it's benefited my career hugely, and it started my career. So I owe a lot to my mum, but actually living in chaos, because it's done me a favor, because I've now got a successful career from it. So I'm very grateful for all of the things that have happened as my growing up, because they've had a positive impact somewhere.
They're all life lessons. And does anyone sort of resonate with that? Or on the flip side, do you still have you literally mirror how your parents were? Lottie, I see you nodding.
Yeah, I think as queer people, it's quite interesting because most of us have been raised by heterosexual parents. So we don't really have the role models that you do as heterosexuals in terms of parenting units. So it's interesting for me to reflect back on my own upbringing and the roles of my mum and my dad, and kind of see myself and my wife and what our roles are, and kind of reconfiguring the idea of family. And I think it will be interesting for my daughter to have grown up with two mums. Who knows what her future and her sexuality will be, but you know, I keep having to remind her that she'll talk about wanting to get married, and she's always talking about wanting to get married to her best friend who's a girl. And I keep having to remind her that, like, you might be straight, there might be, or boy, you know, which is so often like the other way around for straight families, because you just know you're just seeing what's modeled to you. So for her, the most normal parenting dynamic in the world is to have two mums. So she kind of can't quite conceive of anything different at the moment, which is what so many, you know, heterosexual parents have with their children, assuming that they're going to be a mum and a dad. So it's just something I've been thinking about actually recently. Yeah.
Can I just ask, is that something that naturally happens in gay relationships, that, you know, the children of gay parents, they do generally go the same way as their parents?
I don't think so necessarily, no. I think it's more that they're just, it's presented as an equal possibility for them in a way that it isn't. You know, straight culture is everywhere. They're not lacking straight role models. You just need to pick up any book or turn on the TV or look at any number of your friends. You've got, you know, examples of, you've got the fact that it's more quote unquote normal to have a mum and a dad pretty much everywhere. But I'd be interested to know the statistics of, you know, how many children of queer parents do grow up to be queer. I guess it's like, it's probably easier to be gay because it's presented as a option to you, and you can see that you can be happy and successful and have a loving relationship. But I don't think it's a given at all.
It's really, I guess there hasn't been any studies like that yet, has there?
No, when you start looking into it, as we did for our book, there's so little actual research done into LGBT families and the children of them. It just doesn't seem to really be anyone's priority. So I think over the next few years, we'll start to see some surveys done and some really interesting things. I mean, there was a survey done recently which proved, I mean, no surprise, that children of LGBT parents perform in life as well, if not better, than children of heterosexual parents. So, you know, that was a little pat on the head, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, it's crazy in a way that was done. Do you think? Like, because it would go without saying.
I mean, of course, yeah. It's sorry, the light's just gone off. It's a slightly, you know, it's a sort of slightly strange question to have asked in the first place, like as though there was a possibility that children with queer parents wouldn't be as well adjusted. So it's a funny one, because like I'm pleased with the results, but I'm also questioning the necessity of that particular survey in the first place. I mean, it's interesting in the fact that a lot of queer parents really, really, really want their child. So when they have a child, because they've had to work so hard to get it, there's a sense that they're going to put everything into raising it, as opposed to maybe someone who sort of had a child by accident or didn't necessarily want to become a parent or wasn't ready to become a parent. And the sort of life experiences of children in those different scenarios. That's quite interesting.
I'm an adopted child, so I completely get that, because I thought the same thing. I thought, you know, why did my mum and dad spend so much time without me when they went to all the trouble in the world to get me? So I always think it's a really strange way that I've grown up, because they, you know, they took 3 years to adopt me from an orphanage in Sri Lanka, and then when they brought me back, you know, they were working till midnight most nights, so I barely spent any time with them, which is why our relationship is functional. But I always think, you know, I've become an ambassador for Adoption UK recently, and you know, my goal is to always talk about the positivities of how amazing adoption is. The fact that people go out of their way to bring a child into their home is just unbelievable. Even though I didn't spend loads of time with my parents, you know, I think, God, what an amazing thing they did for me. I wouldn't be where I am without them. So yeah, you put everything into it, don't you? It's even more special, I think, when you're adopting, bringing a child in, or even going through IVF, all of those things, you know, because you want it so much more.
That's a really interesting point. And also, sort of leading on from that, and also Stuart, what you were saying earlier about when you had kids, your role, you sort of now moved into the, can you say lead parent role? But did you know you always wanted kids growing up? Was children always on your sort of life map?
Yeah. I've always kind of got on well with kids. I was a teacher. I was a kindergarten teacher before I became a writer, so that was my job. And just, it was the most exhausting. Like, I don't do it now for a good reason, because it just wore me out completely. But I loved it, and I loved hanging out with the kids, and being around them. And so I always thought that I wanted kids, but it's not like it's not something you ever take for granted that you'll just be able to have them, I think. So when I sort of got together with my wife, we had a sort of discussion, was like, if it doesn't work out, what do we do? And we kind of figured, nothing, go on nice holidays, have time to ourselves. But it did. And I still think I'm pretty good at kids, really. I've started writing children's books because, well, partly for my own kids, really, because I want them to be involved in my work. I want them to sort of see that they can do something creative, and it isn't, an impossible thing. Like when I was a kid, books were just these things that arrived, and you didn't know who wrote them, and they seemed like an impossible thing that anyone could do. And so I did that for kids, and now I get to read books to rooms full of children, which is
amazing.
Yeah. Sometimes it's amazing. Sometimes, I mean, the most honest audience.
Oh yeah, they can be a tough crowd, can't they?
Yeah, I mean, you've always had experience, all either on social media or having comments, trolled, they would say, but kids just give it to you, don't they?
Oh, completely. Yeah. And questions and answer sessions after you finish reading are always like, they're never about the book. They're always about like, what happened to your hair? Tell me about what. But I really enjoy that. I like the fact that I've written adult books as well, and you do readings for them, and there's always a sort of a level of there's a filter where people will, they'll be polite, or they'll try and impress you, or they'll be you do the opposite of that on purpose. But with kids, it's everything's so sort of instinctive, and there's I love it.
And Andrea, you mentioned obviously your house full of boys, likening it to a frat house. Has anything surprised you when it comes to sort of raising your family? For example, did you think you'd be, I'm a cool mom, like the fun parent, but actually in actuality, you're not like that at all? Has anything surprised you on that journey?
Well, I suppose, I grew up in a family where my mum was pretty relaxed, and like there weren't that many rules, which it was very instinct-led parenting. It wasn't like set routines around anything. I've lent into that a little bit with my own kids. I never read any manuals. I've been very sort of relaxed. But as they've got older, I am definitely the disciplinarian in my home. I'm like now channeling my father, who was like a bit more, I think it's that immigrant generation as well. He came here in the 70s, had to work really hard. And it was just like he instilled this education into me. Like, if you get a job and you're educated, then no one can take that away. And it was such an obsession with getting education. And I suppose like now I am a little bit sort of like that with the kids in terms of discipline around that, and I'm not as relaxed and cool perhaps as I thought I would, but I mean, I still have quite a Will and I, when we first had kids, we definitely came at it with the kids will fit into our life rather than the other way around. And the kids know that there is life outside them. Mummy and Daddy have their own life together, and we have fun together, and we have careers outside them. And it's not kid-centric. Mm-hmm. I suppose that's something that you don't know how you're going to do it really fully until you actually do. I mean, I always knew I wanted children, but I didn't know. I really didn't have an idea of which bits of my parenting I would pull on, you know, and you just, I don't know, you just work it out day by day, month by month, you know.
As much as you mentioned about reading manuals or not reading manuals, and I know, and can you ever be prepared? I don't have kids, and I've actually never wanted, I've never wanted kids, and it's odd because I think growing up and seeing your friends, it's sort of like, well, you will one day, like suddenly I'm going to wake up. So I had weirdly a fear that I might wake up one day and really want kids. I like kids, but I've lived like that, which is, it's still seen a bit like, oh, really? Or you will? I'm like, well, I'm going to be 40 soon. So they're like, you will one day. I'm like, okay. But with sort of raising kids, and like, can you ever prep, or are you once they arrive, you are like winging it? Like can you prep?
You don't know what kind of kid you're going to have either.
Yeah.
So you can go in with
That's
the kind of
good point.
mindset of I'm going to do this. And even when you've got 2 kids, you parent one way with one of them, and then you think, right, we'll just have another one, and it'll be exactly the same. And it's a completely different personality that comes out. And you have to throw away any toolbox that you've got and start again. So I think, I mean, I don't know about you guys, it's sort of muddling through it.
I think so. Yeah, I've always. I mean, we had no clue what we were doing. I think you just do. Every day is different. You just go with it. But somehow you naturally do it. You know what you're doing. You find the way. You think you're not going to have a clue, and it just happens naturally. You just have this instinct, like you said, of what to do and what not to do, and what's right and what's not. We've got quite an open house. It's quite a party house here. So you know, anyone's kids can come. You know, I'm always the one that will have people's kids around at 6 a.m. if they've got to go to work, or I'll be the one that's dropping. So at 6 o'clock, because I've got to go somewhere, and you know, it's quite easy around here. We're really good. I think you're lucky to have a good network. When you become a parent, your network is so important. Your school mum network, those around you, the ones that you can lean on, you know, that helps you with your parenting, doesn't it? Because it means that you can be a better parent if you can have other people's support as well as within your house. I know I lean on a lot of the mums around here, and they lean on me, so I wouldn't be able to be the parent I am without them, because you know, they help a lot. You know, when I need to go into London early and come back late, all of those things.
That's really interesting about sort of that community you built up, whether that's a family or friendship. Has there been a shift in that since becoming a parent? Have you lost some of your oldest friends along the way, or conversely, they've actually really stepped up and been part of that? Because it seems the dynamic does really shift with your sort of your friendship group, especially once you know kids and babies are on the agenda.
I actually live quite far away from all my friends. I live, you know, about 50 minutes, an hour from most of all my best friends. They live in Surrey. I live in Hertfordshire. So we moved out. So I had to create my own network of people around here. So, you know, that's why I rely on them. My actual immediate friends, I don't have around me to help. I'm fortunate that we moved to Tring because my sister-in-law lives here. And that's why we moved here, so that we'd have some help, because we haven't got parents that can help. Charlie's parents are both deceased. My mum is at the bottom of my garden. She lives there because she's got mental health issues. So she can't help because of her mental health. So actually it's only, you know, the mums around me that can help me, and my sister-in-law. So you do grow a community of people around you, especially when your kids go to a school, you meet other mums. And I think there's a lot of stigma about mum relationships and mum groups, and I really hate that, because I think, you know, honestly, all of us are struggling to try and do, you know, get through our days, look after our children, get to work, get back. We all need these people around us, and you know, but and I find them hugely helpful, and you know, they've become really good friends, some of them. But yeah, it's about building a community around you, and having that support is so important, whoever you are. You know, I think when you're a mum, you naturally build that community.
Lottie, have you found that as well with a sort of family and friends? Have you grown your community since having your daughter?
Well, definitely. I mean, there's something that I write about in the book, and that on my podcast we have a sort of problem shared element, and somebody wrote in actually this week saying that they're a gay man. So many of their friends were made sort of on the scene, out clubbing. The friendships revolved around nightlife and going out. And he's now really struggling because he and his husband have adopted a kid, and they feel like their friends, who are still single gay men on the whole, aren't that interested in being part of their family. So I think that within the queer community, there's certainly a bit of a division between people that want to have children and people that don't. I think I'm really lucky that my friends, while the majority, or at least one section of my friendship group, are very fun, outgoing, dynamic, mainly single homosexual men who still at the age of 40 seem to be able to go out clubbing every weekend, which just blows my mind. My best friend is still my daughter's godfather. You know, we still see them, they're interested, they come over, they ask questions about my daughter, they're kind of involved in her life. We all have fun together still. And I am making more and more friends who are LGBTQ and have children, and that's been really nice to build that community and invite my daughter to events with other queer families, and so she's meeting more and more kids who have got two mums or two dads or trans parents or whatever. So that sense of community is really nice as well.
And you're all working parents with high profile careers. How have you made it work? Like, if you could give anyone, because I know so many people, like, depending, like, it doesn't really matter about their family setup, they are still struggling with that whole work-life balance. How do you make it work? Are there any tangible sort of tips or things that have helped you to make it work? Dilly, I mean, you're an expert.
I mean, I think asking for help is the key thing. Asking for help. I think so many of us try and struggle to do it alone, and we can't do it alone. You know, I need the support of other mums. I need the support of someone to come and, you know, do school runs, do pickups, do anything like that, help around the house so that I've got more time with her. You know, I outsource a lot of things just so that I can spend either more quality time with her or that I can get through my day and work. So I think asking for help is something really important that we need to do, whether it's someone to help you with your ironing, your cleaning, your cooking, walking the dog, doing anything that means you've got more time to focus on your job or more time to focus on your time with your family is important, so that you're not trying to do everything to get all at once. Because I think as, you know, we have been a generation for years where we try and do everything ourselves, you know, whether it's asking your partner, your husband, even your own children to muck in and help around the house or do something. I think asking for help is key, you know, not trying to do it all on your own. So it doesn't matter where you get that help from, or if it's your friends, your family, or it's within your own family in your house. It's important. I think that's the key. Ask for help.
Would you agree with that, Stuart? Are you good at asking?
No, I'm terrible at asking for help. I don't ask anyone, and I take it all on, and then every sort of 2 months I just like explode, which isn't, you know, it's not healthy, but it works. I found the balance. I've, like, all the sacrifices I've made have been sort of career-wise. When the kids came along, I cut my hours down at work to kind of, which is kind of, I'm very lucky that I can do that, because there aren't many jobs that you can just sort of slice your hours down in half and nobody really minds. But being a freelance writer, it's perfect for that, because you can just say yes or no to individual jobs rather than, you know, not leaving the office or whatever. So yeah, it's been okay. I've got some really good editors, really understanding editors who, you know, can be like, I'm working until 2 today, so if you want me, these are my hours, and they'll stick to it. I was just looking at my Time Hop. Do you know what Time Hop, the app that shows you all the photos that happened, this day in history that you took?
Oh, that, yeah.
Yeah. And I'm getting all sort of the pandemic photos now from 3 years ago.
Ooh.
And it's just, I don't
Very
know
triggering.
how I got any work done at all. Yeah. It's because what is it now? April. So I was still in like the crazy baking and like super productive, everyone's in this together bit. So all the photos from 3 years ago are just me sort of hanging out with my kids and going to the beach and stuff. It was excellent.
I think there was a point in the pandemic that felt like a bit of a gift, really, for a working parent, because, you know, like I'd always, since I had my babies, always worked full time, and then suddenly I was able to be there for dinner every night and even help cook dinner together and have walks with them in the middle of the day, and it was just so lovely. I mean, the homeschooling bit was a nightmare, but there were some real glimmers of, you know, like we were just given this incredible opportunity that we would, you know, we never had. And I also used it as an opportunity, going back to the networks thing, to build my networks with other mums, because again, I'd never done pickups and things like that at school, and I hadn't been part of the mum network, and I'd sort of felt this sort of scare. I was a bit scared of the school mums, you know, and I met all the mums in my area, and built really strong relationships with them, and the dads through the pandemic. And it was a really lovely time where there was that sense of community anyway, but parents really looked out for each other and helped each other, and it was a really positive thing to see that.
Yeah,
it was such a I mean, it is triggering even to think back. I think you either take the view of let's not think about it again, and can my time hop stop reminding me of that, or like Andrea and Stuart, kind of thinking, oh, there were some moments there that that maybe you can take into your life now, and work permitting. I think it's all become slightly more flexible with our roles. Well, especially we are lucky in the jobs we do that there is an amount of flexibility, but I still think there are things you can take from the pandemic. And is there
non-stop Zoom calls and trying to get the kids out.
We're still I know, literally this was a bit triggering, having a recorded Zoom call just with all the things that can go wrong, such as tractors, internet connections. Stuart, kind of on this subject, a common phrase people seem to say to new parents is enjoy every moment, enjoy it, embrace it. What would you say to that? Should you? It feels quite unrealistic to enjoy every moment.
Yeah, that's complete bollocks. You can't really enjoy every moment of anything. If I went on like the perfect holiday, the most perfect holiday imaginable, I would probably spend 25% of the time just going, oh, I don't like this very much, just because I think that's in my nature. And kids are so hard. Even last night, I had an evening planned. It wasn't much. I just wanted to watch a TV show. That was all I wanted to do. I've been looking forward to it for ages. And then bedtime just went on and on and on and on. And they're kids, and you should. I love them more than anyone in the world, obviously. But they're oh god.
Totally, I hear you.
Oh, it's so hard. It's so hard. Yeah. So you can't enjoy any. You have to take every moment as it comes, I think.
And don't you think that's where a community comes in? Because if you are perhaps just spending time looking through social media, because you perhaps are quite isolated, so you're just seeing that highlight reel, having that community be like, yeah, it was bollocks last night, it was really hard, that is where you get the real conversations through that connection. So I think that's really important. And Lottie, is it the same for you? Obviously you wanted your daughter, the process, it was quite long, hard, and in that process, but there are still times when you're probably wanting to rip your
oh my god, totally out. Like my daughter's she just cannot go to sleep on her own, which is why I was nodding enthusiastically when Stuart was talking. And the other night I got into this ridiculous situation where she was like 8:30 and she decided she had a hot foot. I think you'll relate to this, Stuart, maybe. And she was just like, my foot is so hot, it's like lava. And she was like tossing and turning. And I ended up blowing on her foot, kneeling by her bed, blowing her foot. But I'm not joking, about 40 minutes, just because I so wanted her to go to sleep and I wanted to go and watch TV. And then there was a moment where I was blowing her foot and she was going, don't take breaths. Every time you breathe, you stop blowing. I was like, okay. This has got to stop. This is ridiculous. I'm not enjoying this. Here's a cold flannel. I'm going downstairs to watch Succession, and I'm sorry about your hot foot, but you're just gonna have to deal with it. So there's so many moments where like you catch yourself as a parent and you have to have like a little talking to yourself, like, I don't actually need to be doing this, like, right now. And certainly having people that I can share those more sort of raw, ridiculous moments with has been really important. I think we've talked a lot about mums, and that I think totally, mums are so important, but I really am conscious of like changing the language so we don't always just refer to mums, because all my parent friends are dads, are queer people. Like, I think just parents generally are a fantastic resource, and if somebody can be honest and talk about the crap as well as the joyful moments, like, it can really make the difference and make you feel seen and make you feel like you're not in it alone and you're not completely mad blowing your child's foot for 40 minutes.
Did it work though?
No, that's the thing. It didn't work. I just blew her foot for 40 minutes. She still wasn't asleep. So it's like
Because you
so
kept breathing,
stupid.
Lottie. You can't
No,
breathe
it's because I
in.
had to keep breathing, and then I was like fanning it, and oh, it's ridiculous. It's embarrassing to even admit that I did it. But there you go. I've now admitted it.
And I'm sure people watching will be like, yes, it's the hot foot.
The hot foot syndrome. I did even Google it, and then I mean, don't Google anything, because if you Google hot foot child, it's like all sorts comes up.
So we're coming to the end of this. So again, thank you so much for being so candid and honest and open about, you know, family life in its entirety. But if we could end on one thing, if you could go back and give yourself one piece of advice for becoming a new parent, what would that be? Dilly, shall we start with you?
Oh, gosh, one bit of advice. Breathe. I think just take a breath, take a moment to think, you know, everything changes so quickly. But also you just have, I don't know, it changes so quickly, you know, being a parent. You go from one moment to another. And I think, you know, time passes so quickly. So I think you do have to sometimes take a step back and just enjoy the moment as well. Because, you know, like everyone says, they grow up so quickly. Children change so quickly. 1 minute, you know, you're breathing on their foot. 1 minute, the next minute, you know, they're learning to ride a bike. The next, you know, you're dropping them off at university. So it does change. And I think, God, Nellie's 10 this year. And where has that 10 years gone? You know, I thought so much was going to happen in that 10 years that hasn't. But also so much has happened. So you know, I just don't know what advice you give to anyone, because I think there really is no advice. You just have to take each day as it comes. And, you know, when there are moments, you just have to take a step back and think, okay, I've got this, I can do this. You know, let me take a step back from the situation, look at what it is and try and handle it. But yeah, it's a tough one. It's a really tough question. Yeah.
End on a toughie, great. But breathe, that is, take a beat, breathe.
Take a breath.
Andrea, do you have anything to add to that?
I would just say do it your way. And remember, no one else is raising your kids. Like, everybody's got an experience. Everyone feels that they can offer advice, but that's based on them and their child. And just remember that you are raising your child. You know best. Tear up the rule book and just go with what you feel feels right. And remember also, you don't have to have it all figured out before you have kids. I think a lot of people feel that they have to get to this perfect point in their life, and then it's like, right, now it's kids time. And you know, we had kids a little bit sooner than we actually really expected to, and actually I think it was a really good thing. We were completely unprepared, and we just got on with it and realized we didn't really need very much at the beginning. It just comes with each stage. So just, yeah, you learn on the job.
Stuart, would you agree with that?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. You can't. I mean, what you were saying as well earlier, Andrew, about even if your children are different, that you have to raise your children differently. That's so, like, nobody prepares you for that. My oldest one is very sensitive and likes hugs, and he'll always, you know, he wants sort of reassurance and everything. The youngest one at the school gate today was just punching me in the crotch over and over again. And that's how he expresses love. So that's fine. And that's how I was sort of raised as well. So we kind of rough house each other. So yeah, that's it. But also my advice would be just sort of wait, because it does get a bit easier as you get older. I remember having young kids and going to a work thing, and my face was all just messed up and I looked exhausted. And one of my bosses, who had children who are exactly 2 years older than my two, was just like, give it a year, just wait and see. And it's suddenly they become people. They're not just attention suckers. 2 weeks ago, I went to a shopping centre with my kids, and they could both stand at the urinal and go to the toilet. And I mean, something as small as that, it's world changing. Like, I don't have to rush around and be like, wipe your bum, and like hide in a cubicle and any of that. It's just the little tiny things just get easier and easier.
And Lottie,
I think I'm going to give some quite specific advice, because I agree with what everyone has said, and essentially, like, you can't really give advice because you just have to like roll with it, whatever happens. But the specific thing that I wish we'd done and that we would do differently if we had another one was, we were so worried about breastfeeding, and it just wasn't, I'm sure my wife won't mind me saying, because she was the one that did it, it just wasn't working. It was kind of working, but it was so stressful, it was so hard. it wasn't happening how it was supposed to happen. But instead of just saying, do you know what, let's just, you know, accept this and move to formula, we killed ourselves trying. And like, we ended up in a situation of like breastfeeding like one breast and then the other one, and then doing formula. So which meant that we were up, you know, for hours every night, just trying and trying. And we had some breastfeeding expert who was saying, you've just got to keep doing it. The more you do it, the more it works. And I'm sure that is true for some people. And I know this is quite an emotive issue, but for us, I just wish that we hadn't felt that we were failing because that element of it wasn't working, and that somebody had just said to us, just give your daughter milk. She's crying because she's hungry. Just fill up a bottle with formula and give her the formula, and she'll be happy and your lives will be easier. And while that might not be the case for everyone, for us, that is what we needed to hear. Like, we needed to be given the permission to do that. And I feel like now we realize that, and we kind of look back at the people that were giving us advice at the time and thinking, hang on a sec, you made our lives really difficult. You made us feel like we were failing, and our daughter was suffering because of it. And actually, for somebody to have just said, there is another way, it's okay, would have just been life-changing. So that's my advice.
I think that's a very powerful thing to end on. Yeah, again, and it kind of all links back to the same thing. You can do it your way, you know, whatever makes, you know, your life easier, happier. And yeah, unsolicited advice is not always okay. Thank you so much, guys. Really, really appreciate these stories. And well, I wish you the best for everything coming up, all the adventures you've got coming up. And Dilly, again, thank you for sharing so much with your journey. And yeah, I wish you all the best health. And here's to what I don't even know. I was gonna say here's to 2023. I literally don't even know what year we're in. Is it 2023?
Well, thank you, Holly. It's been so nice talking, actually. Thanks everyone for sharing.